Hey guys, welcome to another Destroyer Academy lesson plan. We're today in lesson B. We're going to be talking about the proper builds per the classification. Classification. So once you classify your destroyer on what you want it to be, well, let's build it, right? So first things first, as I always say in the Destroyer Academy highlights and premiums, you guys can look at the builds on there that I have, but we're just going to go over some of them here. The first thing is, by the way, I'm only going to go over the free to play. I'm not going to go over any of the pay to win ones. Arleigh Burke is by far one of my favorite commanders that are free to play for the American destroyers that have the single gun turrets. What does that mean? That means the turrets that only have one gun coming out of them, right? If you look at the Sumner or the Gearing at tier 8 and legendary, you're going to see, and also Summers, which is tier 7, you're going to see them have dual gun turrets, okay? So basically two barrels coming out of that turret. The reason why I like Arleigh Burke is because he basically tightens your shells up, your grouping. That's what you want. What you'll notice when you're using these guns is that they tend to be all wonky, and every time you shoot them, even one at a time. I've seen some players shoot them one at a time. I used to do that back in the day, but now I shoot them all at once. Double click the trigger, and you shoot all your turrets at one time. I do that. It's a little bit more skill based because if you just have the trigger pulled, then you just have to adjust your aim and not even worry about um, letting go of the trigger. Whereas if you're shooting them all at once, you're basically hoping that RNG helps all your shells at the same time, so they all go in the same area at the same time, and then you're also having to re-click every single time, right? So it's kind of, I don't know. I think that the argument can go both ways, doing one or the other. Um, I think personally speaking, if you shoot them one at a time, you can adjust your aim a little bit better. But it's some of the best players that I know shoot them all at once. So hoping that you get all shells on target, and get big chunk damage. So that's kind of what the reason for that. Anyways, Arleigh Burke helps with that grouping, and I think he's a lot better than Halsey. But if you don't have Halsey, or excuse me, if you have Halsey but you don't have Arleigh Burke, then obviously go with Halsey. But this is, you know, one of those situations where you don't need perceptive. You can build for 1,000 cuts, and here it gives you an added shell grouping. Obviously, you decrease your HP in that regard, so I mean, at that point, you'll have like plus 15% shell grouping, minus 5% dispersion. So your guns are going to be right on target. But you lose 5% HP while doing that. I think this is a really good perk to use with this commander, and obviously 1,000 cuts instead if you want to. But Halsey is the other guy I was talking about, and this is the build that I have on him. Instead of perceptive, you can use twist and track, but the reason why you don't do twist and track, or I think it's completely useless for the Americans, is because the traverse speed of your guns are so fast. They're the fastest in the game. I wouldn't even worry about it. Like, you don't need to increase it. If you did, they'd be fucking lasers. You know, you could. I mean, you could if you want to, but I really think that perceptive is much better, decreasing that splash damage. And then again, 1,000 cuts is another way of going too. Japan. So Tanaka is probably everybody's favorite commander. Free to play for um, the torpedo line. This is what you should build it as. However, again, you can, instead of perceptive, you can go with back in stock. Obviously, your inspirations are going to be, dependent on what you want to do. But Sims and Bay, or Sims and Swirsky, whichever one is higher, just put those as inspirations. If you want to call it training wheels, that's fine, whatever. But I just feel like having more HP and better concealment is exactly what destroyers need. That's their biggest weakness, is they don't have much HP to begin with. So increasing that with Sims per tier is very, very nice. Max and hem out, and then Swirsky with your seed detectability, or you can use Bay which Bay decreases your air detectability and sea detectability. I think it just says -4% destroyer detectability. It doesn't say sea or air, so it's for both. Which I found that like within the last 6 months, I think somebody told me about that. Anyway, that's Tanaka for the torp boats, and then Kurita for the gunboats. Which, in my opinion, he's kind of the only one because they don't really have one yet. You can kind of argue Hellsinger, but even his perks are kind of weird. I'm not really, I don't understand him at all. I feel like he'd be a better inspiration because I mean, imagine 20% smoke radius. Oh my god, and that goes for anything. So you could literally put him on anything for that. But I think other than that, he's kind of useless. I don't know, but that's just me. Anyways, so yeah, and then they do have a few generic commanders. I think I saw, or is it just one? Yeah, okay, never mind, it's just one. This guy here. So real time for consumables, and he's you can do the back in stock contact limit for the torpedo line or the gunboat line. You would just go right down the middle basically, and then you can do reaching out to if you want. But yeah, so those are the commanders that I always go with for the free to play. Is just these two down here. The British. Okay, so this one's a tough one to talk about because there's a new, there's a new ship that's out that's basically like the Jutland, and I forgot what the campaign is. What, a Somme. So it's like the Jutland. I haven't looked at the specs, but I just kind of glimpsed them a little bit. But anyways, so the two commanders that they have here, they have Philip Vian and Turwit. Turwit's more for torpedo reload / like gunboaty, whereas Philip is better at like increasing your survivability and your speed overall. And then you got Jellicoe that has a funny, so you have Unstoppable here, so you can put them on your commanders as well, and you do have heals on some of these boats. So this perk actually does help your lightning, for example, that has its heals. We also have a will to rebuild, and I think recently it got rework. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it's just funny. The other thing about generic commanders is some of them are they do help with your carriers too. So Philip Vian, let's go over the this commander itself. Like you have the increasing incoming fire dispersion, quick fix, look at me now, with perceptive, smoke on the water. When you read these specs, you'll notice that a lot of them, I mean, they're all green. So green means survivability. So you have more smoke, you have perceptive, you have look at me now. And then you also notice, you're like, oh, wait a minute, I got 2 range perks here. Could I build for range? Yes. Should you? No. But you can. It's not going to be as good. Like you don't have, when you put these out, I don't even think you can pass like 12.5 on your range. So you can't even get to 13 with your lightning and all that. Because lightning I think starts at like 9.5 or something like that, or 10. So I mean it's gonna be really, really hard for you to get to that 13 unless you have you put in your range mod. But it's just tough because you're gonna be in smoke and you can be a little mini cruiser and you can pop your smoke in there, but you have a sonar, so you should be in the cap contesting and helping your team out. I feel like if you build for range with the British especially, you're becoming kind of like a selfish player and you're not really helping your team out. You got to do your job, right? And I think you're not really doing that if you build for range. But you can kind of, like I said, you can build how you want, just make sure that you play it that way as well. Reginald Tyrwhitt, probably the most popular one. You do have a funny little standard fall ability here that increases or decreases your reload time, excuse me, as you lose HP on your guns and turrets and all that. So that's nice. I think it's interesting that, you know, these perks, like, a lot of people just don't use them because as a destroyer you don't want to lose HP. You don't want an excuse to lose HP. So, you know, you get perceptive in there. And it helps minimize the amount of splash damage you get. But the reason why perceptive is better than all these other perks, especially for cap contesting, is because you want to know where the DD is approximately, so you know where to launch your torpedoes. Your torpedoes are great zoning torps. Obviously, you shoot them out one at a time, but you can shoot them all at once in an area where that destroyer is in the cap. If you're in the cap, the closer you are to any cap, the more accurate your perceptive ability is, because, you know, especially if they're already in the cap, they're contesting, it tells you where they're at. Why is that important? Is because if you have bad torpedo angles, which the British notoriously do, you have to make sure that your ship is already turned in a certain way, instead of you having to then do a little UE and, you know, be broadside to launch your torps. You want to already kind of be backing into the cap with your torps at the ready, because you don't want to be caught with torpedoes coming your way either. So that's why this is really important to build it like that. And then smoke on the water to increase your duration of the dispersion time, and also the deployment time while it's out there. Can you go with Destroy Be Destroyed? Yes, but that annoying main battery shell grouping on the British, it's so annoying, dude. And I always had the hardest time with maxing this out. That's why I don't max it out or max out this commander, because of that ability there. But, you know, if I'm going to only be using smoke on the water, then I might as well just max them out, because your damage control party cooldown there, that legendary special effect, is really important on your destroyers, especially when you're engaged against an enemy or a bunch of people are shooting at you. You want to have this ability there to be able to get your DCP back in time to save your life before you know, before they end up getting you on the kill feed. That's Reginald Tierwit. There's not really another free-to-play commander. Germany. So they have Von Spee and Eric Bay. Von Spee does help with concealment twice, technically. It's like a concealment and a half. So you have your Look at Me Now, but then you also have Sunset. It decreases your destroyer detectability while also decreasing your torpedo detectability. So yeah, that's nice. Now, the reason why your concealment is not as good on Von Spee as it is on Bay, because this has 2 and Bay technically only has 1, but it's because if you add Bay's 6% with its 4%, or 4.5, or 4%. So if you go Look at Me, so you got Look at Me Now with his base trade, that's 10%. Versus if you go with Von Spee, it's a 6 and then 2.5. But then you also decrease your torp detectability, so that's kind of like where it's at there. And then you have Swirsky. You can also use Bay instead of Swirsky there. But this is the build for Von Spee. Von Spee is more of a torpedo boat commander. Helps your, you know, obviously your torps. But he, you know, has different abilities here that Bay doesn't have. Bay's more of a gunboat commander, and he also helps with their sonar, where Von Spee doesn't do that. Von Spee also helps with your overall speed, whereas Bay does not. But Bay helps you with cap contesting, and this is the build that I have for the cap contester. This was for the range gunboats. So I have a preset for like that alternate line and a preset for the main line. You should do that with all your destroyer lines as well. France has Louis, and it has I think it has a generic commander in there somewhere. Yeah, Du Fournet, and that's the HE shell damage. And then Philippe Abagnon, which he is the probably the one that is used the most. This is the commander that increases your HE shell damage for your guns. While also, remember I talked about the alternate line of destroyers? That's what this for. Trident Gambit. Okay. Torpedo boost distance. This Trident Gambit came with those boats that the alternate line, and make sure that you watch that video. I do have a video out for how Trident Gambit works, that's exactly what it's called. And then also I have the alternate line of destroyers in my Destroyer Academy highlights. Be sure to check those out from the tier 6 all the way to 8. Yeah. And then you got Louis Violette, which he helps. Again, this is one of those like Philip Vian versus Reginald Tyrwhitt. It's the same kind of comparison. You know, this guy helps more with your survivability. This is interesting too. It's like you can build for your guns, like destroy detectability time after firing guns, so minus 23.75%. That's off of the 20 seconds standard. So let's say a fifth. So probably like 5.5 seconds off. So instead of 20 seconds, you're now good detected for 14.5. Now I have a sidestep on here because you don't have smoke. So the only problem is you increase your rotor shift time, which for me doesn't matter if you're going to be open water anyway. You just have to plan for that. You know, turn ahead of time to dodge shells. The Russians, which I don't talk about the Russians enough, but they are range gunboats. They are not cap contesting boats. You can build them for flanking and for surprise attacks because they're very tanky. And they have good torpedoes too. So you got Vladimir Trubetskoy, which he is the fire starting range gunboat build. He doesn't increase your range, but that's what Rumble's for. If you don't have Rumble, then it's kind of a bummer. But they do have pretty good range already. Not having Rumble is a huge bummer. But once you get to tier 7, right? What I would recommend you guys do is if you don't have Rumble to get that range up, right? What I recommend you guys do, instead of using Vladimir, and I guess you can still use Vladimir if you're going to fire from smoke, and just get your range as high as much as possible. But you don't really get the range mod until you get to tier 7, right? So at tier 7, you can use Vladimir. In my opinion, if you're going to use, you know, I guess up until tier 7, I'd probably use Anton Gearin. I think he's going to be your best like commander for that. He's going to decrease your concealment. And then you have Perceptive there, Smoke on the Water, Unstoppable, and then Quick Fix because you're going to take a lot of splash damage. Now the AP shell multiplier is interesting because the AP on the Russians isn't that good. But I mean, I probably would have, instead of AP shell multiplier here, I probably would have done the HE pen or something like that. But it is what it is. This is the commander that I recommend. Now, because you don't have Rumble and you want to build this for range, you could do this with as well. So you got Glass Cannon and Sidestep to increase your range. And then I probably go with just Sims. I wouldn't go with Bay. If you're going to build for range, don't even bother putting concealment, because if you're going to be shooting from range, you don't need concealment. What you need is, you know, like that French commander. This guy is a very good commander for that concealment firing. So you can shoot from range and also set off a few fires and then go dark in 14.5 seconds. Or you could build for tankiness, and we'll get to that in a second, but Bergamini. Basically decreasing the amount of damage you get, the more damage you get or take. So that's kind of an interesting perk. But yeah, these are the two commanders, the Anton Gearin and Vladimir Trubetskoy. Vladimir, the reason why I call him the set fire guy is because he has a playing with fire. which is a super annoying perk, but it does increase your range by 5%. It doesn't double up like the other guy does. So it sucks because I kind of wish that this was like a base perk for him because that'd be hilarious. But it is what it is because then you can combine him with Anton and have even better range since you don't have Rumble. But you got plus 6% here and then another 6% here. So you got 12% range. Yeah, so I'd probably go with Anton, Sims, and then Bergamini. Or I'd rather have to be honest with you, I'd rather have Bergamini over the French commander, but just a lot tankier in that regard. And then you also have Von Essen, which is another commander that you could use. He does have reaching out, but it's only 2%. I wouldn't even use this guy for the destroyers whatsoever. So I wouldn't even bother even going into that. So the Italians are interesting because they're gunboats. If you have the one exception I would say is like Paolo Emilio is it's still a gunboat, but the guns are not even that good. They do well against other destroyers, but they reload slow. It's like 9-second reload time. And I built that one for range as well. And it does pretty decent. I do have a video out for the Paolo, but it's one of those that's like the Torps have 24,000 damage. You got 3 sets of 4, but like you can devastate an entire team within the first few minutes of the game. Once you get over there, you pop your smoke, and you got the exhaust smoke that you can use to get up in there. But they don't reload very fast, so you're kind of only effective in that little bit of time, and then you're done. It's basically you just YOLO in there. Hopefully you survive, killing those 3 ships, because you can literally kill 3 ships with those 3 salvos. That's it, right? And I say that's it. It just means that you only have the 3 salvos. So you can kill multiple ships with those. That's a lot of damage on those torps. So 4 torpedoes can kill any ship. But the problem is, okay, so let's say you don't survive, then what? You know what I mean? So it's like that's kind of one of the reasons why that ship kind of baffles me, because it can be really good as a ranged gunboat, but nobody builds it that way. And also the guns aren't, like, even though you have the range, the guns still don't do the damage that they should. Anyways, Rizzo. He is the gunboat guy, whereas Bergamini is the tanky guy with torpedoes on the side. You got torpedo increased damage while you're in the smoke, and also your damage is increased as you lose HP. And then you have that little tanky build as well in here, which is kind of interesting. I feel like this would be better with a gunboat, but it's a good inspiration for a gunboat, so don't be afraid to use them. And then you also have Segala Fulgolsi, which he's kind of like a hybrid between those two. He can do torps and guns with the range there. But yeah, they all interesting. Look at the base trait, base trait, and then look at the complementary perks that it comes with, because how you build them is how you should play them. But the Italians, being as fast as they are, they got that engine boost. You don't really have to build for speed if you don't want to. I think if you're going to build for speed, I think Bergamini is the way to go. I don't know if Fulgolsi... Yeah, Bergamini... actually, Fulgolsi does have... that flank speed. But you have to reduce your concealment. That's the other thing, too, is like... It's really hard to sacrifice concealment on the Italians and the Russians because they already have shitty concealment, so... But I'd go with Give Me Speed as a very good perk for the Italians, because you're not going to be cap contesting, so Unstoppable's kind of, I don't want to say useless, but it's just one of those things that is not going to be as useful since you're going to be away from the enemy for the most part, and with Give Me Speed you're going to try to get away from them as much as possible. Then you have Campioni, which is another one. Incoming damage from shells and torpedoes to your ship, so you can get minus 5%, but that's flat across the board. Whereas Bergamini, you get tankier as you lose HP. Pan-European. You'll basically only have the 2 unless you want to build a funny AA build. By the way, this is my Friesen build for the AA. You can kind of tweak it how you want, but anyways, Sig Erickson, very straightforward. He is a torpedo captain. Torpedo damage, engine boost cooldown time, with torpedo reload as his basic traits, and then sheltered arms, unstoppable. Swirsky is the gunboat guy. He does have some torpedo capabilities as well, but with Fox Flare, that's with that alternate line, and any of the destroyers that do have the radar, this is what it benefits. Pan Asian. So you have Sazing Bing and Ding Shisheng. Den Shisheng is more of the torpedo boat, and then Sazing Bing is the gunboat commander. We'll go through that there, because the other factions don't have anything. So this is the gunboat commander. Why did I go with Twisted Track instead of Perceptive? The guns turn slow. That's it. That's why Twisted Track is more viable here. Knuckle Duster, and then Unstoppable. You can look again. You can look at these on your own time and check them out. But I just want to classify these commanders to then match it with those ship classifications that you have. Sims and Swirsky with these. So this is the torpedo commander, and obviously you can go with back in stock instead. But Quantum of Solace decreases your torpedo detectability while also increasing your torpedo damage. And then this one also, Knuckle Duster, is just one of those that's awesome to use, man. I know that it's minus 10% damage, but it's 10%, of like 12,000. It's not really that much. So I think it's really important to be able to knock or incapacitate modules of ships. But anyways, I hope this lesson plan helps you guys out. Pick the commander for the right build. That's kind of the whole goal. And I did talk about different variances, on what commanders to really go with, and what commanders go with what build, or what ship. So hopefully that helps. If you guys have any questions, again, feel free to contact me, and I'll talk to you guys in lesson plan C. Take care.